Inshallah, we are going to start we'll proceed from where we stopped. So welcome each and every one of us back from the short break of Ramadan that we had. So for the sake of all of us, those that were part of the classes before we went on the Ramadan break, and also for the sake of also those that's joining us. So we have decided to start today's class by having a summarized kind of coverage of the topics we have covered till date. So we're going to go over some of those topics. So to briefly refresh our brain, both those people that are just coming in and those people that have been here before. So inshallah, so we'll be looking briefly in a summarized form what we have covered so far. So it's going to serve as a refreshing touch for each and every one of us, both those people that are just joining us and those that we've been together, so that we can together move to the next stage of the training, which we are going to be moving into higher level, like ensemble, hybrid, and so many other topics of interest that we're going to be covering, inshallah. So I also want to clarify that even for those people that are joining, or anybody want to revise what we have done before, there are videos of all our previous sections. So we can always, anyone, we have two platforms. We have the WhatsApp group. We also have the Telegram group, so platform. And then hopefully soon we hope to have the YouTube also in addition. The summarized cover topics today. So we started by looking at a few codes. That was how we started. Try to let us see what is machine learning and how important is this field. So we discussed several of them, and then we finally summarized this our friend. So which is the one from Tony Tita, the director of DARPA then. He said machine learning is the next internet, which means that if there is any phenomenon that is going to revolutionize the world, the way internet did, then it is the machine learning they are looking up to. And as we can see, it is already doing as opined. So everywhere you go, in academics, in medical, mention any field. So everybody's talking of machine learning. It is getting to a point now that latest information made us realize some of the topmost universities, including King Fahd University of Petroleum, for example, all the courses are mandated to actually take machine learning for their undergraduates. So telling us it is a future of what we call the fourth industrial revolution. So, and there is nothing but artificial intelligence teleguided revolution. That's what they refer to as the fourth industrial revolution. Then we move up to the preamble and saying that what do we mean by machine learning? We say it is automating the automation. So, which means try to get computers to program themselves rather than writing program explicitly for machines. So we want them to write it by themselves. So how do we do that? So it means we need to write a software that will make a program to write the program for itself, which is very complicated. That's the big bottleneck. How do we write a program to do that? So machine learning now came with an idea that let the data do the work instead. If you give me data, then we can make it, expose our machine learning algorithm to this data, and automatically the computer will come up with its own program. That when we have similar data in future, it can continue to predict or to extrapolate or to analyze the data based on what it has seen before. So that made us to now compare the traditional programming that we know. In the old system of programming, we have the data and the program. This program has to be written by a programmer. So then you give the data and the program, then they generate output. But the new paradigm is saying, writing this program is very challenging. So the answer, okay, no problem. Give me data, give me the output of that data. I'll give these two to the computer. The computer will generate the program by itself. This indeed is a very wonderful idea, and no wonder it has started to revolutionize the way we do things generally. So because it means you are in the clinic, you give me data, you have the output of the data, we have data for some patient, we know the status of those patients, we can give those data to the system using the machine learning algorithm. They will come up with a program that we can now use this program to forecast, to predict what might happen to the patient. We might predict who might be having a particular type of disease and host of other possible applications. And the question that comes to mind then was, how does this happen? Is it magic? We said, no, it's not a magic. It is just like a garden. So when we go to our farm, we plant something. You see, after some time, you start seeing this germinating. How does it happen? So algorithms in machine learning is like the seed you planted. If you plant the wrong seed, it might not germinate. Or if it germinates, it might not be good. So you have to make sure you are planting the correct seed, which is the algorithm. Then you have to, after planting your seed in your farm, you need to provide the necessary nutrients. If the land is very barren, you need to give fertilizer. If you give the wrong fertilizer, then you are not going to get any result, or what result you get is not going to be okay. In that case, our data is like the nutrient. If you get the very good data, you are likely to get good result. Otherwise, you might end up getting nothing or very bad results. So we have the gardener, so who is in charge of making sure the appropriate fertilizer is used, making sure the appropriate seed is used, and so many other decisions. That is you. You are the machine learning practitioner. You have to take this decision. What algorithm should I use? What kind of data? Is the data okay? Do I need to pre-process the data? That is your own responsibility. So if you have a very bad machine learning expert, or is not that qualified, then it might be a very big issue because you make wrong decision. So then finally, the output of all this trouble is what we know as the plant. Just like you can see the plant now, germinated already. It looks very green and very greenish and very interesting to see. The same way, if you do the right thing with your algorithm, your data, and you, the machine learning expert, take the right decision, you end up having programs, which is the outcome of machine learning. So we have reversed what we used to have before, that we need human being to write the program. So now we are saying no more. So let the system write the program by itself, just provide the data and the algorithms, and everything should be fine. So that made us to now define that what is machine learning? We said the goal of machine learning is to build computer systems that can adapt and learn from their experience. So try to learn from the data that you have provided, and then try to adapt as the data changes. And from there, you can use this experience to perform in the future. So another way is to look at it that machine learning discovers the relationship between the variables of a system, which are usually categorized into three. We have the input variable, we have the output variable, and we have the hidden variable. From where? From direct samples of the system. So once you give me the input and the output, there are some information that map the input to the output. Usually, human beings don't have this information. You see it? So that hidden variable is what our machine learning is going to solve. So you give me a data for some patient, you give me the weight of this patient, you give me the age, and some other attribute. And then you say, okay, this patient, this is status, this patient is diabetes, this one is not diabetes, this one is diabetes. We now want to see what is in this age and weight that is making this guy to be diabetes. Why is this one not diabetes? So the relationship, that is what we call the hidden relationship. That hidden relationship is what machine learning wants to find out. And once it's able to find it out, it will come up with what we call the hypothesis function, which is finally going to be what we refer to as the program. So with this program, once we understand the relationship between this input and output, we come up with a program. This program, whenever you have new patient, just give me the weight and then the age of the patient. It will predict for you if this patient is going to be diabetes or not. This is a summary of what machine learning tries to do, and it has found this application in several areas. In that respect, we said for this generic basis, we have a system with input variable, which is the x, x1, x2, up to xn. Output variable is the y, as I've mentioned. The hidden variable is what we call the age. This age, some people call it the hypothesis function. Hypothesis function. or the functional form. Every algorithm has its own different hypothesis function. Some people also call it model. People call it the model. When you train and build your model, that's the model, because that's going to be, it contains the hidden relationship between the input and the output. Some people also call it the program, as we've said. This is the program, which is the outcome of our training process for the machine learning. After that, we move to let us realize that there are different types of machine learning paradigms or subfields. We have the association. So just like I said earlier, we should be reminded that each and every of these topics I just mentioned shortly, they have detailed videos on those platforms as I mentioned. Now, this is just a general short summary verse or revision. In the association, so example is basket analysis, which is popularly used when you go to shopping mall to buy. So they are monitoring you, what you are buying. So they try to take note of what you are buying. So after analyzing at the end of the month, then we can come up with promotional sales. If we notice that there's an item A, that everybody that bought item B always bought A, always buy A, then what do? We try to say, okay, next time we put A at the beginning of the shop, we put B at the end of the shop, of the mall here. So when you buy A, you have to look for B. So while looking for B, you are going to be seeing a lot of promotional sales, advertisement for you. They will not put A and B together because our association rule mining already identified that everybody that purchased A always purchased B. So common sense say that, okay, why don't you make life easy for the customer? Put the two of them together so that I can just enter the shopping mall, buy the two, and I can leave. But no, because the mall or the shop owner, they want to make more money. So they want you to move around the mall, and then you can see other things while you are looking for B. However, if association mining shows that, okay, there is an item called D, no one buys this item D for the past 35 days. In fact, in the past 1 month, very few people bought it. So in the next promotion sale, we're going to say, you buy A, we give you D for free. Buy A and get D for free. Because they knew that they're not buying it and it's going to expire. So based on the knowledge of this association mining they have used, they try to calculate, okay, what is the probability that if somebody bought it, they're going to buy this? So this one used to be maybe 20 real before. They will now make it to be 22 real. This one used to be 10 real before. They'll say, okay, buy one A and get this free. So indirectly, they are selling this 10 real product for you for 2 real. So nothing is really free. So because if they leave it in the shopping mall, it might get expired, which means it's 0 real. So they take advantage of that to get them out. That is association. But then the most popular one is what we call the supervised learning. We're going to cover this one extensively because it's the most majority of applications of machine learning falls into these categories. So we are going to look at it. It has the classification and it also has the regression. We discuss this one in details, inshallah. Then we have the unsupervised learning. In the supervised learning here, machine learning is trained under the presence of a teacher. Like the example I just gave, we have the input and we have the output. So we show the input to the machine and let it also see the output. Try to understand what is the relationship between the input and the output that make the output to be generated by that input. Once it's noted that it understood very well the relationship, then it comes up with what we call the H, their processing function, which we call the program or the model. And then we can use it to do our prediction. And then it is divided into two. We have the classification, we have the regression. For the classification, this is when you have the output to be discrete value, like yes or no. Is it diabetes or not? Yes or no. Any question that you have where you can answer yes or no, that is classification. But however, if you have to predict or you need to train your system to understand actual numbers, like the age of someone, 26.5, he is 35 years of age, he is 36.7 years of age, this is known as a regression problem. So later we'll see each of them separately. So then we have the we have the unsupervised learning. Unsupervised learning, sometimes we have the inputs like the age and like the weight, but the output, we don't know the output. Either because it got lost or we don't have information about it. But still, we want to categorize this patient into diabetes or non-diabetes, even though we don't have outputs. We call it unsupervised learning. So popular one being the clustering. So we try to see, our system, we try to understand how can we categorize this into two, if there are two groups there, diabetes or non-diabetes, without even having any label. Also, this will be looked into later, inshallah. Then we have semi-supervised. This is between the two here. So you have some data that is labeled and you have some that are not labeled. In that case, we have a kind of mushakal, a mixture of the two types of data set. We call them semi-supervised. So it's in between the two. And then finally, we have the reinforcement. We have the reinforcement learning. We have the reinforcement learning, so which is a special type of learning that is often used in the agent. So it's not supervised or unsupervised, but rather it is like a policy base. So it could be positive, it could be negative, it could be punishment, it could be extinction. So we let you do something. So once you have finished what you are doing, we compensate you by saying, oh, thank you, you have done great. And if you have not done good, we withdraw something from you so that you know that you have not done good. Let's say you have a child that performed excellently well in an assignment given. So you give the child chocolate. So you are reinforcing that behavior. What you have done today, I so much like it, take chocolate. See, so that next time the child will know that, oh, I did great, they gave me chocolate. So that is a kind of positive now. But sometimes it does something you don't like. Okay, you withdraw something you have promised or something you used to give, you don't give that day. Because you have not done this thing very well, I'm not going to give you your chocolate today. That is negative. And sometimes it could even be punishment. So this is called reinforcement learning. It's another form of learning whereby the system is made to learn by awarding either reward or a kind of punishment based on the outcome of what it has carried out. So each of these also later on will have opportunity of it. And the supervised learning, which I say is the big umbrella, is the very common one. This is what people use a lot. So unsupervised learning is an abnormality, except in few cases whereby we use it, like, okay, let us use it to see, okay, like customer, we want to do customer shunning. We want to know the customer that will run away from your company. So we don't have data before. There's no way we know who is going to run away. So we try to use clustering to understand it. So it's like a kind of a special case when we don't have complete data with input and output. Now, so the supervised learning, given a training example, you'll be given X1, then and the output of this, and then you'll be given the second one. This one, why this one is a vector? It's a vector. So that could be X, this X1 alone could be X1, X2, X3, which are features or attributes. And then you have the output here, F of X1 is the output. So they give you several of them. So for unknown function, there's a relationship between this Y, the output, and then the X, but we don't know that relationship. So we are looking for this F during the supervised learning process. So we want to find F of X so that if we know F of X, then we can predict X prime, where X prime is the value of X that has never been seen before. It's not in our training set. It's a new sample. It's a new sample that we need to find out what is the output appropriately. Now, so this is the idea of supervised learning. So once we have the supervised learning successfully run, then you are going to have a model. This is going to be the model. This is going to be the model F, which we now know classically and appropriately. So now once we're able to train the system, so in which case, I used to say that, like I told you before, I mentioned earlier, so the supervised learning is divided into two stages. We have the training phase and we have the testing phase. During the training, we have Y is equal to F of X. So we know X, we know Y during the training. These are known. These are known. However, this F is what we don't know during the training. So we need to find out what is this. This is unknown. So So after the training, we come up with a model or hypothesis function, H, which is representing this F now. We now know it. During the testing, we now want to check the model that we have built. Are we sure it is working or not? So we need to test it. So during testing, Y is equal to F of X is still there, but this time around we have X. They will give us new X, X prime, where X prime is not in the training set. We have never seen this before. The system has never been exposed to this. So we now provide it to F has been gotten after the training, during training. We got the value of F. Now we don't know why. See, we assume that we don't know it. Even if you know it, you have to keep it away. You don't expose it to the system. So we now use the model that we have built to predict if you give me this X prime, what's going to be the output, which is Y prime. Once I got that particular output, maybe predict output to me to be diabetes, yes. Then I'll compare it to the original output that will be given to me, and then I'll check, is it correct or is not correct? Out of 100, maybe 70 are correct, 30 are not correct. That means we have 70% accuracy. Then we need to make it better so that we always want to get as high as possible accuracy. Then we went further also that time, we discussed generic supervised machine learning framework. Now every supervised machine learning framework will pass through this process. So we have the data gathering stage where you gather your data and then you try to prepare your data. Then we have the data preprocessing proper. So, and then we move to model building. Model building, which we call training the model, we train the model. So once you train it, then you need to check model testing. You test it. Is it working fine? You need to check. Is there any need to refine my model? Is my model getting the best result possible? If no, there's need to refine the model. Yes, I'm not getting enough accuracy as I want. So parameter tuning, you have to change some parameter. Changing the parameter might involve changing so many parameters, but sometimes you might need to change the algorithm you are using actually. Then you go back again, keep testing. Is there a need for me to improve it? No, everything is fine. Then I build the final model. Then I might have another portion of the data to validate, to make sure that what I tested here that is fine, it is still okay even at this point. So finally, I use it to do prediction. If it's a company or hospital, then we can deploy it to real life, prediction, result analysis, interpretation of result, identification of hotspots. What are the important points we can see? What is the next model we're going to build? Because every model comes with its challenges. Some they are very accurate, but it takes a lot of time. So you might want to go for a model that is going to be accurate, but at the same time, not taking too much time. Some are accurate, but they are taking so many features, like 50 features. Imagine somebody else to do 50 medical tests before they can run your model. That is a huge body. Can we develop another model with lesser number of features? That is why we identify what are the hotspots, what are the challenges, what are the prospects, and then there's always room for improvement. So then this is the machine learning framework as I explained earlier. I said we have the Y, the output, F is the prediction function or hypothesis function or the model as the case may be. Then we have the feature that you have to extract. It could be image feature, it could be any feature type, depending on the problem we are solving. So during the training, given a training set of label example, X1 up to XY, then we need to estimate the prediction function F by minimizing the prediction error on the training set. All this we have discussed in detail in those videos that we dealt with machine learning and how it works. So once you have done that, then we move to the testing stage where we are going to apply F, which is the F that we have gotten already after the training, which is the model, to a never before seen test example. A test example that we have never seen before, we apply it to it, and then we can get the value of the outputs. It's as simple as that. Now, and then this goes in these steps. So we have the training images. Maybe I'm trying to identify some items. So you have the image features, extract the image features. You have to convert all these are raw images. You have to convert them to feature that the computer can understand. So Then you have to train. During the training, you have labels. So when you bring this one in, there's a label that will tell you that this is an apple. This is an apple. The first one is apple. When the second one comes in, you say this is pear. This one will say, oh, this is tomato. This is what we call training labels. So after that, once you have done this, then you have a learn model. This learn model is called hypothesis function, or people call it model or the prediction function. We don't stop at that. We need to test what we have built. This learn model, okay, you have claimed you learn, you understand all these things now. Okay, can you come and classify this for me? They gave me a new apple now, but the system doesn't know it is an apple. So we extract the features, then pass it to the learn model. We bring out this learn model is transfer A now. So we give it, can you tell me the prediction? If this one says, oh, this is tomatoes, we know that, okay, there's an error. We test as many as possible. So out of maybe 15 testing, we were able to get like 12 correctly, 3 are not correct. That is not too bad. So we want to improve upon it. This is the generalized idea of the supervised machine learning that we've explained much in detail. Then after that, we move to successful application of machine learning. I think we have like 2 different sections on this. So I refer us to those videos. We explain them in details. As you know, there's virtually hardly you see places today that doesn't apply machine learning. It's everywhere, in the engineering, in the medical, in education, even in agricultural environment. Just think of anything you can talk of. So we have lots of applications that are there for us to think of. And your favorite area, computer vision, biosurveillance, empirical sciences. So we've discussed all this in details. Then we try to let us realize that when a machine learning not needed, somebody may ask us, do we have system whereby we don't need machine learning? Say, when the relationship between all the system variables, and what are the system variables I told us before? Input variable, output variable, and the hidden. The hidden variable is what usually human beings don't know this variable. Because we look at the data, we only know the input and output. What is relating the input to the output? The mathematician will call it function. Y is equal to f of x. Y is equal to f of x. At least give me this f. If I know x, I can only predict y. What is that f? To get it is the problem. See it? So we're not saying that there are situations that you don't need this. You don't need to trouble yourself. We said we don't need machine learning if all the systems are very clear. For example, I want to calculate the salary of someone. You know the salary is basic. Salary is basic plus the allowances. So you know the allowances to be 2,000. You know the basic to be maybe 3,000. So you just add it together. So we know everything. We know this is addition. This is the function that is relating them together. This is input, this is output. We have a function addition. When you have a very simple thing like this, we can say that, okay, we don't need machine learning for it. See? But then we say, this is not the case for almost any real system. That most real life systems, they are more complicated like this than this one. I want to know if a student is going to pass his exam. It's not something you can put together 1 + 1. No, we have to look into a lot of parameters. Who is teaching the course? Is the student present in class? What was the score of the student in the prerequisite course for this course? And so many other questions that we can ask. Now, then we have relevant emerging fields of machine learning. We took us through it. You can see we have the machine learning, we have artificial intelligence as the big guy on top. Then you have the natural language processing, the cognitive science, the robotics, the knowledge-based system. Then this is our concern. You can see the machine learning here is a big guy on its own. See, so under machine learning, you have deep learning. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning. So, and then we have, when you have talk of data now, big data. When data meets machine learning, then we start different thing again. Data mining, data analytics, data science. So we have prescriptive, predictive, and descriptive, and so many things we can do with it. We have opportunity later to pick each of these topics, inshallah, one after the other, to make it clearer. Looking at the bigger picture once again, we have the big eye, artificial intelligence is there, then we have the machine learning, then we have the deep learning. So I see people get confused. What is deep learning? What is machine learning? See, so we can see it clearly. Machine learning is inside AI. Why deep learning is inside machine learning, a special type of machine learning. And tools and modules. There are so many tools that you can use for machine learning, so many of them. So, however, in this training at this level, we have decided to be using Weka for several reasons. See, Python, Orange, there are so many things, so many methods that are possible. So don't be confused. We use this one for bibliography. Yeah, this is just for bibliography recommendation. So why Weka? So why don't we go into real Python programming? And I said, this is one of the big mistakes I see in a lot of machine learning courses online. See, it's like somebody is trying to learn computer science and he only understands English language. Now you try to teach him computer science using Russian language. You know, that's a double trouble. So as you are teaching computer science, it's also try to learn Russian at the same time, learning two things simultaneously, which draw people back. So in essence, what I'm saying is machine learning is different from programming. To use classical Python, you need to know programming. So we don't want to be teaching programming at the same time teaching machine learning. And there's no really need for that. It's not compulsory actually. It should be a matter of choice. So, but with Weka, it's a GUI, graphical user interface. You just click and click and click. You can easily get it with few tips. Once you understand what machine learning means, then you can go and apply it anywhere you want. You want to do Python, you want to do R, you want to do whatever method you want to use. Sorry, whatever tools you want to use. But from my experience, what I've noticed is in programming, is someone can get stuck, try to run a particular code for a few hours. For somebody just starting a new concept, there's no need for that. You go for what you learn. Once you learn it, you are very much comfortable with it. Then you can decide to go back and then use whatever techniques you want to use. So later on in the course of our courses, hopefully, we have course to come back to Python, especially if there are people that are comfortable with Python, then we see the way. But for people from engineering, from medical, because machine learning, from my own opinion and the point of view, it's like a tool that anybody can use it. So I don't see why I should bother you with going to learn programming first before you can use machine learning, when it is not compulsory for you to know programming. With Weka, you can do a lot of analytics to your paper, to your data. You can analyze, you can implement both supervised and unsupervised machine learning, even without writing a single code, by just clicking and clicking the GUI that is provided. So if there is kind of opportunity, then I've seen a lot of people, they register for machine learning online courses, halfway they withdrew because they got bogged down by the programming. They said, we don't know what they are doing there. So in order to avoid that, personally, I avoid it for people who are starting machine learning. Once they know machine learning, then we can both go back to Python and then we can start to do whatever we want to do. So that is why this is the recommended. And sometimes we are shifting, we go to the practical. I open Weka and I show you how to manipulate and do some of these things. Now we're back to our guide, the supervised learning. Most of our discussion will be centered on it for now before we move back to other methods. So as we explained before, this is the concept of training and testing. So when you have supervised learning, you have the prediction of future cases, knowledge extraction, compression, outlier detection. These are some possibilities. So when you say classification, I've told you it's divided into classification, that is supervised learning, and regression. Classification is when you have discrete value to predict, yes or no, or more than two classes. Our C can be 3. The common one is, the very common one is 2, which is called binary classification problem. 2, yes or no. But sometimes you can have more than, like you want to predict the grade of a student. Is it going to get A plus, A, B plus, B? So in that case, more than 3. That's why we call it C. Then we have the real value prediction, which is regression, where you predict the actual numbers. So as we mentioned, that is it. Then in classification versus regression also, we mentioned to ourselves that if I want to predict whether a patient will die from a disease within 6 months, that is classification. we want to mention, is a patient going to die within 6 months? Because the answer is yes or no. Don't let the 6 month here confuse you. It doesn't matter. The question is clear. See, whether a patient will die from a disease, whether or not. So you know that this is classification. But if I want to predict how long, look at that, how long the patient will live, how is the function of how many months, how many weeks, how many hours, how many years. That is regression. It could be 2.5 years. It could be 0.7 years, whatever the value is. So we're encouraged to come up with several examples to try to understand the difference between classification and Basel regression. I refer out to the video also. So a lot of attendees then, they gave a lot of examples from petroleum engineering. So inshallah, once you watch the video, you will enjoy some of those application examples they gave. And then our friend hypothesis space, I explained this also in details, that the hypothesis space determines the functional form, and it defines what are allowable rules for classification or for regression. And each classification or regression method uses a different hypothesis space. So say each classification or regression method uses a different hypothesis space. So when I have neural network as one example of neural machine learning algorithm, it has its own hypothesis space, H, big H. Inside that H, we have different possibilities, H1, H2, up to Hn. So if you have support vector machine as another one, it has its own hypothesis space. And that is one of the methods we're going to start off next week also, is going to be ensembled. How do we merge different methods together? I want to take advantage of them. This guy is operating at a different hypothesis level. This one at another hypothesis level. Can we merge them together to produce a single model? Hopefully, this is taking the advantage of the power of Jama. I mean, a group. In group, when you are in a team, you can do things better because of this hypothesis space. So if we know that hypothesis space differ for each of these algorithms, then we will understand later why ensemble do perform better than individual algorithms. And the concept of hypothesis space led us to define what we refer to as the inductive learning hypothesis. The inductive learning hypothesis, very, very important. It is the secret behind supervised machine learning. If the hypothesis works for enough data, then it will work on new example. The challenge is, what is enough data is the big issue. What is enough to you might not be enough for me. See, what is enough for medical application might not be enough for another engineering application. But then we are not saying 20 samples. People used to ask me this question. I said, it's not a question of yes or no. Doctor, is 200 okay? I said, no, the data will speak for itself. See, we just mentioned enough. Because the hypothesis function states, if it works for enough data during the training, definitely it should be able to work for new examples that are not part of the training. That's why we restated it as saying, any hypothesis found to approximate the target function well over a sufficiently large set of training examples will also approximate the target function over the other unobserved example, the new one. See, so sufficiently large is the issue. How many data samples can we refer to as sufficiently large? Nobody can fix it. So that's why we're talking more about the concept we call let the data speak. It's a very common concept in machine learning. The data will tell us either it's enough or it's not enough. No one can just look at data and say, oh, this data is enough or it's not enough. In some application, 200 samples will be excellent result. In some application, even 1,000 will not be enough. So depending on the nature of the data set and the kind of underlying information that this data set are housing that we don't understand, the machine learning will have to understand them. So then we describe how classification work as one of the type of supervised learning. Here we were able to ourselves to realize that this is an example. We have training data. So we have example, this is training data. So when you have the training data, you give it to the classification algorithm, then we have the classifier that is produced. The classifier tries to understand why this is data given to us. Somebody scored 5, he failed. This is the result, this is the Y, this is the X. 6 pass, 2 fail, 7 pass. So the algorithm tries to understand what is in this data that is making one to fail, the other one to pass. After studying them, the algorithm was able to determine that, okay, if anybody scores less than or equal to 5, it's going to fail. See, if you score less than or equal to 5, that is fail. Otherwise, you are passing. And if you look at the data, this is it. We can easily look at the data now. Oh, this is very simple. Yeah. But imagine we have 2 million data samples. How are you going to go through it one by one and be able to come up with this rule? This is where our machine learning comes in. So machine learning has that capability to process huge data and come up with a representative model. That when you apply this model, so we now need to test our model. This is the model built. We need to check it. We have to bring in a test result. And I told you, test result is not part of this. They must not be part of the training set. You can see it's not here. So this person scored 8. We give it to the model. The model will now check. If CS is less than or equal to 5, the result is less than 5. This is not less than 5. So that's why it's going to output pass. This guy passed because of this testing. Otherwise, if it's less than or equal to 5, it will output fail. This is a very simple example of classification procedure, how it works in machine learning. Yeah. I hope we are following. If anybody has any question along the way, please feel free to signify. So, inshallah, it is not clear. Another example here, illustrating the classification task further. See, we can see here, we divided the data into 2 samples. You can see the same data. The first 10, we use it for training set. The next 5, we use it for testing. So we learn algorithm, we try to understand this data. This attribute is no. This one is no. Why is this one yes? And this one is no. So this is what the algorithm is trying to understand. It will come up with a model, an hypothesis that can summarize how can I differentiate between the yes and the no samples. Once it is done, we call it a model is built, which some people call program, some people call it hypothesis function, some people call it this function F, functional form F. Once we have the function, then we now apply it to the testing set. We know this output already, but we have to hide it from the machine. We don't allow our model to know. So because they gave it to us, we know it. We don't want them to know, so we hide it from it. Okay, this is called induction. In mathematics, we all remember. So that's why we have inductive learning hypothesis. I just summarized for you, if you remember, inductive learning hypothesis. So it's the same induction process in mathematics. So during the induction, we try to have a generalized formula or hypothesis for this guy. Once we get that, then we can now apply it in a deductive way, reverse engineering now. Okay, let's use this model to classify this guy. Okay, is this one going to be no, or is it going to be yes? So this is how classification task works. After that, we move into explaining to ourselves how to evaluate the models. So we don't just build model, we need to evaluate them. We need to check, are they performing or not performing? So we talk about generalization ability of a model, which is how well does a learn or train model, a learned model also called a trained model. How well does a trained model generalize from the data it was trained on to a new test set? So our target is not the training accuracy, because after training, we can give back the training set and ask the system to predict something it has seen before. Most of them will predict 100% accuracy or 99%. So this is called training accuracy. We don't celebrate when we see high result for training accuracy. No, it's not time for celebrating, because it could be an overfitting, which we are going to explain later. Overfitting is when your model is performing on the one it has seen before, but when you give a new sample, it doesn't perform. It fails to recognize it. You see? So in that case, we say it has overfitted. So generalization is concerned with how is my model going to be able to perform on new testing set, the set that has never been seen before. This is the essence of evaluating models. So when we are given training set, even if you get 100% performance on the training set, it doesn't mean you are going to perform on the testing set. So we need to check. In that case, how do we check? How to check generalization ability? In order to estimate, there are 3 major ways to do this work. The first one is to divide your data into 3 sets The other one is to divide into 2 sets. These 2 options are referred to as one. We call it holdout method. Holdout method. Holdout method. That is, holdout means you use one and keep one away from the machine learning model that you are training. So this holdout method is now divided into 2 types. The one that you divide your data into 3, 50% for training, 25% for validation, another 25% for testing or publication testing, final stage testing. You use this if your data is much, you have so much data. But if your data is not that very much to divide into 3, then use only one. This is fine. You divide your training set into 75% of the data and use the 25% for testing. It could be 70% training, 30 for testing. It could be 80 or 20, anything in the range. See, some people go as far as 90, but personally I discourage it because the testing set is very small. So 80, 70, 75, these are fine. Even 65 if you want to go down. But usually the training set should be more to increase the possibility that your model will understand the data set. So this is the first method for evaluating our model, the holdout method. As I said, there is a complete video on this particular explanation in details with examples. The second type, major type, which should be number 3 on the list here, is resampling when there is few data. Usually when the data is very few, we don't have enough data to divide into this holdout method. Imagine somebody is having only 10 samples. You give me 10 samples to train a model. How do I divide into 70% training? That's going to be 7 to 3. That's too small. In that case, I can go for resampling. Even in the resampling, we have special case. We call it holdout one. We call the one fold. That is, you hold one out. You only keep one and use the 9 for training. Keep keeping one for training, as we are going to say. So this is the resampling method. We call it end-fold cross-validation. So in the first type, this is it. You have the data divided into 2 and you go. That's fine. So this is very common in system. So building, you have the data. You have the data. So we have data now. So we have the data. We have training set. We have testing set. We have training set, testing sets. So you build the model and then you use the testing set to check. So we just make it more straightforward. We have training set, you build the model. So you have the testing set where you're going to check and then evaluate if it's okay or not. What is the performance accuracy? Positive or negative? How many positive correctly predicted or otherwise? Excuse me. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is when you decide to divide your data into 3. Like I said, when you have data, huge data, but any of the 2 you use, you are fine. Either you divide into 2 or you divide into 3. It's acceptable in the system. So you have data, you divide it into 2 here. This is training set, this is validation set. You kept out the testing set outside here. So anything you do, model validation, you want to do TECRA, you want to do a kind of model parameter optimization, you use this one to do it, these 2. Training set and this one to check. If it's not okay, you do the training again. Keep doing as many times as possible here. Finally, once you build the final model, you now send it out for the testing set to check it, and then you have the final evaluation. This is initial evaluation to check if what you are developing is good. So if you have enough data set, it's a good way to go, but using only 2 is also fine. And then we have the disjoint validation, the cross validation mentioned. In this case, we have a moving testing set. So this is the full data. Then this is validation set at this first partition. At the second level, what you use as test training set here will become part of the validation, you can see. This one become part of the training set again. So you keep shifting this one down until every partition is going to be used as testing set. So if you use 10-fold, that's why we call it n-fold, because your n can be any number. It can be 3, it can be 5, but the commonest one is 10, 10-fold. Divide your data into 10, and then for every time you have the fold. For the first time, this is defined 10-fold. For the first one, I use this for testing. and I record my result, 80% accuracy. Second time I use this partition for testing, I got 90% accuracy. I have to do that for 10 times. Let's say I'm having 1,000 data sets. I divide it into 10. This one's going to be 100 samples. This one's going to be 100 samples in 10 places. So at the end of the day, I'm going to find the average of all my accuracy, and then I can know the final result of the 10-fold cross-validation. So these are the popular way of evaluating machine learning models. And then the next thing is the describing the classifier errors, but then this is where we are going to put it to stop. So today it is 10:30 already. So inshallah, we're going to continue we're almost done. We're going to finalize the revision of what we have done before, so that just to refresh our brain after almost 1 month plus break in the lecture. Once we refresh our brain, then we move further, inshallah. So looking forward to ensemble techniques as one of our main topics that we're going to be discussing. The advantages of ensemble, why we need ensemble. But before then, inshallah, next week, we'll finish the remaining, summarize the revision of our previous lectures. Like I said, each of these lectures are already documented in the videos that we recorded earlier. So for those that might be joining us for the first time, might have just joined us for the first time, you can chat with somebody who is Tijani by name. You can see his name in the participant list, Dr. Tijani. So you can private chat with him, send your number to him. He will add you to the Telegram. And then the advantage of the Telegram is that you will see all the videos in the past. You can also see there. There's also a WhatsApp group so that people can catch up with when we have any announcement. So thank you very much all for listening. So, and Barakallah fi.